Hello friends, I am Dr. Pranav Khoche from Nutan Vidya Prasarak Mandals, Arts, Commerce and Science College, Lasalgaon. Topic for today's lecture is Figures of Speech, Part 2, under SYBA Discipline Specific Course. The title of the paper is Appreciating Poetry. Friends, in the last lecture, we discussed 4 figures of speech, namely simile, metaphor, conceit or metaphysical conceit, and personification. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss antithesis, paradox, synecdoche, and metonymy. Antithesis, the meaning of the word literally means setting of one thing against another. So the literal meaning of this word is antithesis is setting of one thing against another. In this figure of speech, there is an effective contrast or opposition between two ideas or words by balancing one thing against another. It means that in a single sentence or in a single line, there are two ideas or two words which are contrasting to each other, which are opposite to each other, and they are at the same time, those ideas are balanced. Those ideas are balanced against one another in that particular sentence. For example, take the first sentence, man proposes, God disposes. In this particular sentence, there are two words in the red, that is man and God. In a way, they are contrast to each other, and proposes and disposes, they are in italics. So the balance is between man proposes and God disposes. We always say when we plan something that when we plan something and it doesn't succeed, it doesn't become successful, then we use this saying, man proposes, God disposes. Right? So therefore, in this antithesis, in this sentence, the antithesis is made by these words man and God, entities man and God, and the ideas of being something being proposed and something being disposed. The second sentence is, to err is human, to forgive is divine. Now, err and forgive is in red, means they are opposite to each other. To err means to commit mistake, to commit an error, and to forgive means, so these two qualities of making error and that of forgiveness, they are contrasted in this particular sentence. Moreover, human, quality of being human, being a human being, and quality of divine, quality of being divine, God-like, God is always merciful, we say, they are also contrasted. So the sentence is, to err is human, to forgive is divine. So in this sentence, exemplifying antithesis, err is set against forgiveness or forgive, and human is contrasted with being, quality of being a simple human being is contrasted with the quality of divine. The third sentence is, speech is silver but silence is gold. Now here speech and silence, they are in red, they are in red color, so they are set against each other, and silver and golden, they are in italics, right? So speaking is good, so it is silver, but we always say that when the speaking or the speech doesn't work, the speech doesn't work, then what works? Silence works. So therefore, silence is considered golden, that is more valuable, more precious than speech. And therefore, the contrast is balanced between speech and silence and silver and golden. I hope you have understood the figure of speech called antithesis by these three sentences. Next figure of speech is paradox. It is an interesting figure of speech because, as Cleanthrope says in his essay Language of Paradox, that language of poetry is language of paradox. He very clearly states that. That can mean that poetry is full of examples of paradoxes which make the message of the poet very effective, sometimes emotional, sometimes intense. So, let's see this definition of paradox, which I have taken from a glossary of literary terms by M.H. Abrams. A paradox is a statement. Paradox is a statement which seems to be logically contradictory. In simple words, illogical. It is a statement which seems to be not logical, not logical, not logical or illogical, logically contradictory, or sometimes such statement appears, seems to be even absurd. Absurd means meaningless. So statements of paradox are in apparently they seem very logically contradictory, that they do not make any sense. They sometimes seem to be very meaningless. Yet, this is important, yet paradox turns out, that statement turns out to be interpretable, that is, it turns out to be meaningful. And it turns out to be meaningful in a way, in such a way that makes good sense. Not only sense, but that makes good sense. Friends, always remember, when we come across paradox while listening to something or reading some lines or reading something, we have to think twice about such statements, paradoxical statements. Therefore, I called it an interesting figure of speech. When we read such statements again, then only we can get the deeper meaning of paradox of that statement. Otherwise, we are baffled, we are confused with paradoxical statements. Therefore, we need to be good readers and also give our full attention to such statements. For example, John Donne in Death Thou Shalt Die says in his famous metaphysical poem, "One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more, death thou shalt die." Now the question is, how can he say that death shall be no more? And death thou means old for you. Death you shall die. We wonder here, we get baffled here that how can death itself die? How can death itself be no more, that is dead? Then, when we think deeper about the context of the poem, we understand that the short sleep here is death itself. One short sleep past. After that short sleep, after the death, he wants to say physical death, death of the body. So when a person dies, the soul or spirit cannot die again. Therefore, we die only once. That is according to his philosophy, we die only once. Therefore, he calls death not as an end, but he calls death as a short sleep, one short sleep. It is not complete full stop, according to John Donne, but it is a short sleep. And after that, the spirit or the soul cannot die again, and therefore, in this way, death itself dies, death itself becomes defeated. Death gets defeated, death gets lost by the immortality of spirit or the soul, and therefore, in a way, the death itself dies. Another example of paradox is, oh, death in life, the days that are no more. This is the line from the collection of elegies by Alfred Lord Tennyson titled In Memoriam. So, we are again confused, we again start thinking, we again wonder, how can there be death in life? How can his life, how can there be death in the poet's life or in the speaker's life? Right? But when we think about the speaker's utterance, oh death in life, it means that the poet or the speaker is so miserable, his life has become so miserable, so sorrowful, so wretched, that he compares his life itself with death. So his life is like death. He is experiencing in a way, he experiences in a way death itself in his life while he is living, and therefore then this paradox makes sense, rather a good sense, and it also makes us emotional. Third sentence is again a saying which is quite common saying, there is no one as poor as a wealthy miser. Miser means who does not spend money. Even if that person has a lot of money, he does not spend that money. In common language, we also call that such person a stingy person, right? Stingy person who does not spend money despite having a lot of it. And wealthy, obviously, having a lot of money. So, wealthy miser, and he who is as who is called the poorest. The sentence is, there is no one as poor as a wealthy miser. That wealthy miser is called the poorest person in the world. Why? Because that person is wealthy, but he is miser. He is miser, I'm sorry. The person is wealthy, such a person is wealthy, but still he is a miser, he is reluctant, he is unwilling to spend the money, and therefore that money is of no use to him. The money becomes of no use, useless to him if he doesn't spend the money. What's the use of money if you don't spend it, if you don't enjoy life with your money? Therefore, this sentence makes sense that even if person is wealthy and he doesn't spend his money, then he is miser and he is the poorest in the world. He is the poorest person in the world. So I hope that you have understood this example as well, this paradox as well. Friends, that paradox is not used only in poetry, though mainly it becomes poetry more effective, but it is not used only in poetry. It is used in novels or dramas or other genres of literature, and moreover, we face many, please remember, we face so many paradoxical situations in our own life daily. So, figures of speech are not limited in poetry or to poetry only, but if we understand them well, we can enjoy them in our daily life as well. Next figure of speech is synecdoche. It's a Greek word which means taking together. Greek for taking together. In this figure of speech, a part of something is used to signify or represent or mean. A part of something is used to signify the whole, and the whole is used to signify a part. Again, we will say this. Synecdoche is a figure of speech in which a part of something complete, the part of something whole is used to signify the whole. So the part is used to signify or mean the complete thing, and vice versa. Many a times the whole, that is the complete thing, is used to show only a part or signify only a part. Here are some common examples or common sayings that we use in our daily life. They represent synecdoche. First is, two heads are better than one. Two heads are better than one. Here, heads stand for persons. Heads stand for person. They do not stand for, or they do not, we need not take here the meaning literally that two cut off heads, cut off from their bodies, respective bodies, they are better than the one head. No. It has to be taken figuratively that two heads are better than one. So, persons, two persons are better than one person. It means two persons are better than one person to discuss anything or to execute anything. Right? So part of the body, that is head, signifies the complete person. Second example is opposite to this. In this synecdoche, the whole class laughed at him. Here, the whole class means all the students in the class. Class means the classroom doesn't laugh, right? Classroom didn't laugh at him. The room itself, no. But here the class means all the students in the class. Therefore, in this particular sentence, the whole, that is the complete class, stands for, it signifies its parts, that is students. Similarly, the third example is similar to the first example. Many hands are working on the field. Many hands are working on the field. So here many hands means actual people, those farm laborers or farmers. Many people are working on the field. So again here in this sentence, hands signify, or hand stands for the complete person. So the part signify the whole. Here in this example, the part signifies the whole. The last figure of speech in today's discussion is metonymy, which means in Greek change of name. Literally it means change of name. So in metonymy, the literal term for one thing, literal term or that word for one thing, literal term for one thing is applied to another thing, is applied to another with which it has become closely related or with which it has become closely associated. So we will now see this or understand this particular figure of speech by some examples. First sentence is, a pen is mightier than the sword. A pen is mightier than the sword. We know that a pen stands for a writer, or ideas he expresses, ideas expressed by writers or philosophers. Therefore, pen stands for writer, it stands for ideas, it stands for intellect, right? It stands for concepts, it stands for thoughts, and the sword obviously stands for the physical power or the power of violence. Now, pain is therefore associated, closely associated with its doer, that is writer, and the sword signifies, sword represents violence, power of violence or some physical power. And therefore the sentence means the writer's words, something written, those thoughts, they are undying. They are undying, they are immortal, and therefore, and so, they are more powerful than the power of physical violence. Second example is mercy suits the scepter. Here in this sentence, the scepter indicates the power of the king's power. Mercy means quality of forgiveness, right? So it suits only the king. Who can forgive? Only only the one who is powerful and who is capable to punish can forgive. Mahatma Gandhi in one of his essays say that a cat cannot a cat can sorry a mouse cannot say a mouse cannot tell to the cat that it has forgiven. So a mouse cannot, he says that mouse cannot tell the cat that okay, I have forgiven you. No, because mouse does not have power. Mouse does not have power to forgive someone, to and that to the forgive the cat, right? So therefore, mercy suits the scepter means the scepter indicating, representing the king, the power of king, and therefore it suits, mercy only suits the king or king's power because he is powerful, he is capable. The kings used to be capable of punishment, severe punishment, and so they were also capable of giving mercy, being merciful. So the scepter indicates here, represents the power of king. The third sentence is, the third example is, we must obey the crown. Here crown means king or monarchy. Crown represents or signifies, it means king or power of king. And we must obey the crown means we must obey the king. Right? I hope you have understood these three examples and you have also understood the concept or the figure of speech of metonymy. Here it gets more clear. This is the crown and this is the scepter in Marathi, which we call Rajdand. Right? So a crown and scepter, these things, they represent monarchy or king. Friends, I hope that you have understood all these four figures of speech, namely antithesis, paradox, synecdoche, and metonymy. There are at least 12 more figures of speech, important, significant figures of speech, as far as our study of poetry is concerned. Our paper of appreciating poetry is concerned. In the next lectures, we will deal with them. Till then, goodbye. See you. If you have any doubt, please contact me. Like this video, share this video with your friends who might be needing the knowledge of figures of speech for their study. Thank you. Thank you so much.